this schedule really shapes up for a playoff run with a 12-team playoff.
Areas that, you need to get from experience, which is just, hey, I need to make quicker decisions.
How do you define success for this team?
National championship.
What's going on, y'all? Bud Elliott here. This is my summer school series on the Cover 3 College Football Podcast. And today I'm going to talk a little Penn State. I'm going to my man, Daniel Gallen of Lions 247. Daniel, what's going on, man?
Thanks for having me, Bud. I look forward to this every year since I joined the network. It's a good way to get some thoughts out on Penn State and to maybe get some questions that I haven't thought of or haven't heard before.
Absolutely. And you guys run an awesome site over there at Lions 247 and a very lively board as well. I know a lot of Cover 3 listeners over there, so we're very appreciative to have them. Pretty big step last year. So making the playoff and also, winning a playoff game, getting to the semifinals. How would you describe the mindset of this program heading into 2025?
Yeah, I think the mindset of Penn State right now is that they know how close they came last year to being able to play for a national championship. And they're very aware of what their shortcomings were. I think we've seen that in how they've addressed things this offseason in terms of guys they've added in the portal, some moves they've made at wide receiver, players who hit the portal and left. I think that Penn State's approach to this offseason was, reshaping, retooling, and putting themselves in position to make a pretty big run next year with everything they have coming back.
Let's talk offense a little bit. I mean, getting Drew Allar to come back is absolutely huge, I think, because he's already good, but has potential to get better. It would seem. Where would you like to see him grow the most?
Yeah, James Franklin got asked this question a couple times this spring, and his answer was just everything. And it's a little bit of a cop-out answer, but I also can see it where with Allar, there's all these little things that if he takes incremental steps across the board, you can really see him raise his game. But I think the one thing that it comes back to is how is he going to perform in these big games? What is he going to do when Oregon comes to Beaver Stadium in September? What is he going to do at Columbus against Ohio State in early November? And then any postseason games. I think you look at what he did last year. His completion percentage, I believe, was 71.6%. At the end of the 12-game regular season, and that dropped 5 points over the course of the 4 postseason games. So things just weren't quite as crisp, and you saw some of the backbreaking mistakes show up. Think about the Big Ten championship game, which I thought was one of the better games I've seen him play. They got back into that game because of the ground game, but he was the touchdown pass to Trey Wallace was a thing of beauty. But then you see him throw that interception downfield that is just a backbreaker. And then obviously everyone knows what happened at the end of the Orange Bowl in terms of that interception. And so I think that this was a knock on Allar coming out of his first year as a starter in 2023. We saw a different guy last year, as a junior, second-year starter. The confidence is there, the swagger is there. The first game of the year at West Virginia, he stiff arms Josiah Trotter in the face and then stands over him. You look at a picture of Drew Allar and you watch his interviews, that's not the guy you're expecting to see out there on the field, but that is in there. So I think the next thing for him from a more intangible perspective is coming into these big games with that same approach and applying, that same level.
Speaking of guys you throw into, obviously Wallace and Evans move on. I mean, they have Ross, Hudson, Pena. Is there a guy in that group that stands out as maybe a real go-to guy that they haven't had in prior years?
We'll see. All those guys are interesting in their own ways. The 3 transfers coming in, Devontae Ross is doing the step up, and I think that there's a lot of faith in him to be able to do that. The feedback is he's taken to the resources available to him at Penn State that he didn't necessarily have at Troy really well and really applying himself in that way. And he had that game against Iowa last year that's been pointed to a number of times by James Franklin in terms of something that gave them confidence that Ross can compete in this level. But that's still an unknown. I think he's the high ceiling addition. Kyron Hudson is the high floor addition because he's been at USC. I think he's really solid. He's going to be a contested catch guy, big body target for Drew Allar. And then, I think Pena also comes in with a high floor. I'm not quite sure where his ceiling is. I think as we get to know him, as we get to watch a little bit more film of him, I think I'll be able to have a little bit more of a stronger opinion on that. But I mean, he has the proven production. I know he was in a pretty pass-happy offense up at Syracuse, but numbers are numbers. If you're seeing the ball that many times and you're catching it and you're making plays, I think that that's something that can really add to this offense.
I think a lot of us recruit Nicks probably know this, but who is next up after Tyler Warren at tight end for Penn State?
That's a good question because there's a lot of names that could be the next up. When you talk about the line of succession, which Penn State has, pretty much adhered to over these past couple of years, going from Pat Fryermuth to Brenton Strange to Theo Johnson to Tyler Warren. Khalil Dinkins would be the next guy up. He's a redshirt senior from Pittsburgh. His dad played in the NFL for a while. He's a go-to guy on like fourth down and in the red zone. He's one of those guys that at a certain point in the season, I went through his box score and all of his catches were either for first downs or touchdowns. He hasn't been used a ton because of Tyler Warren and these other guys, but he's athletic. He's developed into a really, really good blocker. That's been a huge selling point for him. After him, this is where the line of succession, I think, can get, you can leapfrog some guys, move guys around. Luke Reynolds, he was a 5-star recruit in the class of 2024, number 1 tight end for 24/7 Sports, burned his red shirt last year, has just developed into a really solid guy with a high ceiling. He has a similar background to Tyler Warren, where he was a high school quarterback. He's not quite the same body type as Warren, but since Reynolds has been on campus, like he showed up January 2024 at 214 pounds. He's in the 240s by the time fall camp rolls around and hasn't lost a step. Made a highlight reel catch against Kent State last year. Had one of the biggest plays of the season on a big run on a fake punt against Minnesota when Penn State was trying to ice a 1-point victory. So he's someone there's a lot of excitement about. Andrew Rapplier, he was hurt last year. We'll see when he's back. He's a really big-bodied guy. Comes from New England, did the prep school circuit there, is a good receiver, is well regarded as a blocker. And then they added Andrew Olish this year, who they flipped him from Michigan, in-state kid, really well regarded as a receiver. Still needs to do some physical development. I think the roster right now has him at 220 pounds. He'll need to bulk up a little bit more. The way that Penn State uses, their tight ends and what they asked them to do. And then the last guy I'll mention is Joey Schlaffer. He's another one of these guys that comes in as like a, more of a wide receiver, really skinny, 6'5". He's up in the 240s. He's a guy you look at on the field and you're like, oh, he is bigger. He has developed. So I think Dinkins will be the tight end 1 to start the year, given, he's a veteran. They trust him. He can play in the run game. But we'll see a lot of different guys at that spot.
That's going to be exciting. Very excited about both the backs coming back. And then also, what's your read on this offensive line? Because I there's one way I can look at it. I'm like, this could be really good.
Yeah, I mean, the running backs, like getting Singleton and Allen back, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, I mean, it's a coup, for Penn State. I think that, there's a world where both those guys go pro and you don't really think twice about it just because of the nature of that position and what they've accomplished. And then there's a world where they get one back and you're kind of like, oh, this might be the best case scenario for them. But to have both of them back, I mean, that's huge. I think anyone who's watched Penn State, especially in, down the stretch last year, when both of those guys really got rolling in the postseason, you know what you're going to get from them. I think that, it says something when one of the biggest position battles on your roster is going to be RB3. So, I think Penn State's set on the ground. And a big reason for that is this offensive line. I think that it's going to be a really solid unit. Phil Trautwein has done a great job of solidifying the depth up front and developing these guys. You lose Sal Wormley to the NFL, but he was the one guy that would rotate out the most last year because they wanted to get Cooper Cousins onto the field. They wanted to get JB Nelson, who's since transferred. They wanted to get him on the field without taking Venga Ioane off the field. So on the line, you're bringing back 4 starters. Right guard is the only spot you're losing. You have Anthony Donka and Nolan Rucci back at right tackle. Donka started the first 11 games of the year, got hurt against Minnesota. Rucci, former 5-star recruit who started his career at Wisconsin, he steps in. little bit of a shaky start, but then once they got into the college football playoff, he took it to another gear, was probably playing the best football of his college career. So they have both those guys back, which is going to be an interesting balance, interesting rotation. But yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of different guys they can play. And I think Phil Troutwine has really showed that if you can play, they're going to get you onto the field. Like, they don't mind doing a rotation. They don't mind necessarily doing a timeshare. They won't do it at center, and they haven't really done it traditionally at left tackle. But if they think you can play and help the team and that you've earned it, you're going to get onto the field.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk a little bit about things we did not see from Knowles offense, or Knowles. We just did Ohio State. Excuse me. We'll talk Knowles in a second. Things we didn't see from Kotelnicki's offense last year, you think you can unlock this year?
I think that there's going to be some more interesting horizontal movement when it comes to the wide receivers. I think we saw that a little bit last year. The one guy that we were really expecting to see get a lot of those opportunities was Caden Saunders. He's a former top 100 recruit, but had a weird nagging ankle injury where he was only playing punt returner, but only fair catching, and then wasn't playing offense, re-aggravated it, got shut down for the season. He's healthy. Yeah, I think he can be a kind of gadgety guy for you, given his quickness. Tyseer Denmark is a redshirt freshman. I think that he's another guy that you can do some different things to get the ball in his hands. But yeah, I think we'll see a little bit more of that, for Kotelnicki. I think that they want to build on what they did last year. I think James Franklin described it as, I think it was Franklin or maybe Kotelnicki, but like they're at the 400 level course now, coming into the spring. Last year it's intro, so they can do some different things. And but yeah, I mean, I think one thing that people would want to see, this is going back a couple of years, is a little bit more downfield passing from Drew Allar, given what his skill set is and what we believe he can do. We'll see if we get there, because it's a little wide receiver dependent.
Makes a lot of sense. All right, let's hit a break here, and then after we're going to come back and talk about this new Penn State defense.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, guys, welcome back to Summer School here on the Cover 3 College Football Podcast. That's my man, Daniel Gallen of Lions 247. Let's talk about a Penn State defense, which is pretty much always really salty. You have a new D coordinator this year, and Jim Knowles coming over from national champion Ohio State. That was a pretty good get, obviously, after Tom Allen left for Clemson. How much change do you think we'll see under Knowles, and how much of that is actually attributable maybe to Knowles versus just the personnel that Penn State lost?
Yeah, I think the one thing that James Franklin has talked about during this series of defensive coordinator hires, where they went from Brent Pry in 2021, Manny Diaz 2022, Tom Allen 2024, now Jim Knowles in 2025. Like, the big thing that James Franklin has talked about is that he's looking for guys whose schemes fit the personnel that Penn State has traditionally had. That's been something that he's considered a lot, because they don't want these guys that they've recruited to do certain things to have to completely change their bodies or completely change their roles. That's something that Franklin looks for in keeping continuity. Obviously, everyone does things a little bit differently. Last year, Tom Allen introduced the Lion spot, which was like a hybrid safety linebacker nickel that had potential, but KJ Winston got hurt. They had to move stuff around. I think with Jim Knowles coming in, you're going to see something similar in terms of a lot of 4-2-5. And I think that some of that is the Knowles scheme. Some of that's also personnel. That's, what James Franklin talks about, where like the determining whether you're going to have a third linebacker or a fifth defensive back. Obviously, that depends on the scheme your coordinator is running. Excuse me. But it also depends on the personnel that you have on your roster, where if your fifth defensive back can be more of an add than your third linebacker. That's something that these D coordinators, when they come in, that they keep in mind. And so, I think this Knowles defense, what we saw in the spring game, it was obviously really vanilla. We only saw one personnel grouping the entire time, but it was 5 DBs out there with only 2 linebackers. So I think that you're going to see Penn State really take advantage of the depth that it's built in its secondary.
Front seven wise, I mean, like they do lose some pretty impactful guys, most notably Abdul Carter. If they avoid like a major drop off there, who are the reasons why?
I think you're going to look at Denai Dennis Sutton really raising his game, former 5-star recruit, definitely could have gone pro after last season, but elected to come back for his senior year. He was really good in the college football playoff, and he is someone that is a tone setter emotionally. I was watching the Ashton Genty highlights going into before the draft. You see a lot of Denai Dennis Sutton in there. And the one thing that they don't show is that after every hit on Genty, he is jumping up, he's screaming, he's gesturing, like he's a wild man out there. And I think that can do a lot for your defense. Max Granville is a redshirt freshman. He reclassified from class of 2025 to the class of 2024 in like the last week of July last year and showed up on campus. He's someone that there is a lot of excitement about. And when Abdul Carter got hurt in the Fiesta Bowl, Granville was the guy who entered in Carter's spot. And if Carter had been limited or couldn't go in the Orange Bowl, you would have had a big Max Granville game. So those are the two that stand out to me. Zariah Fisher is a 6th-year senior. He's missed 2 seasons because of injury. We'll see what you get out of him, but just physically, if you can have a 6th-year guy in the trenches, that's kind of an inherent advantage if he gets to line up against a sophomore offensive tackle here or there. But they've got some other young guys that we're kind of wait and see on. Jalen Harvey, Malachi Williams are redshirt freshmen. Ivan Kamaju is a true freshman who got a lot of run with the quote unquote ones in the spring game. We'll see where he is, but yeah, I mean, replacing Carter is like that's a heavy lift. Like he was so good last year, but I think that they have a lot of different pieces where you can get production from.
Safety wise, they lost a lot, some of which played and some of which did not, obviously, with Winston going down as early as he did. What's your confidence level in the safety room?
I think it's pretty high. I think Zachy Wheatley, he's back for his 5th year. He's another guy that considered going pro after last season, but elected to come back for another year. And part of the reason that he decided to come back is that he's going to be the guy. That room is super young right now. Anthony Poindexter, the safeties coach, was joking about it where he got here in 2021. So you look at the upperclassmen he's coached in his career. He had Jaquan Brisker, Jair Brown, Keaton Ellis, and then Jalen Reed and KJ Winston. Like that's a really good group of safeties and good group of leaders. Now it's Zachy Wheatley's turn to be that guy in a room where he's pretty much 2 years older than every other scholarship player. So I think a lot is going to hinge on Wheatley. We've heard really good things about his work ethic. Sounds like after the 2023 season, he had a little sit down with his coaches and they told him what he needed to do, and he's done it. So he's put himself in this position. Dejon Lane was the guy last year that when KJ Winston went down, that they really wanted to step up. He was a true freshman, enrolled in the summer out of the Gilman School in Baltimore, did some nice things, has some nice traits, but you saw the growing pains. And I talked to Jalen Reed about it at the Fiesta Bowl, and Reed was like, yeah, like he's good. Like he has everything, but it's so hard as a true freshman to get forced into a role like that and have to have such a heavy lift. And you saw Lane's playing time really fluctuate over the course of the season. So I think that the Lane and Wheatley pairing, I think, is what you're most likely going to see. But it's another position where you got other guys. Antoine Belgrave Shorter, a Jacksonville kid. I've liked what I've seen out of him this spring. King Mack came back from Alabama through the transfer portal. He's gone Penn State, Alabama, Penn State in his 3 years. He was banged up this spring, so we didn't see much, but he might be a factor in that nickel spot. So, Anthony Poindexter, there's a lot of these position coaches at Penn State where it's like they've got the benefit of the doubt that there's talent in their rooms and they've developed guys in the past. So when we get to August, you'll have faith in them. And I think that Poindexter's done that with the safeties at Penn State.
Is there any chance this offense is better than the defense?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think so,
Okay.
just because of losing someone like Abdul Carter. I think when you look at, I know that you take away Tyler Warren from the offense, but you can replace catches, you can move touches around, you can do things like that. on the defense, like you can't really do that with sacks and TFLs. Like it's hard to reassign those things. So I think there is a chance.
All right. The schedule is pretty favorable, I think. I mean, you get the 3 non-cons that should be walkovers, and then you get Oregon, and Oregon's breaking in a lot of new pieces. So, like, that won't be easy, but I think you'd rather have them early than late. And then you go, what, at UCLA, host Northwestern. I mean, is at Iowa the third toughest game on this schedule?
Probably. I
Yeah.
think also because of the spot that it's in,
Right.
where you don't have the bye week after the West Coast trip this year. So it's, play in LA against UCLA, come back against Northwestern, and then go to Iowa City, which has been a bit of a house of horrors at times.
Exactly. Given that, how do we define success for Penn State this year?
It's a good question. I think last year, going into the season, the bar that I set for success was hosting a first round playoff game. So I wasn't expecting them to win the Big Ten, but I was expecting them to be in that second tier that I think we think of Penn State as being a part of. So they 5 to 8, you get to host the first round playoff game. And then after that, my thought was everything's house money a little bit. And we saw how that played out. I think this year you raise that bar a little bit where you're thinking Big Ten champion or number 5 seed going into the playoff. Like, I think that's where I hone in on how do you raise the bar a little bit, because all these guys are a year older. The expectations are a little bit more. The logical thing to expect is improving on what you saw last year. And there's not a lot of room between the bar and the ceiling in this situation. So I think incrementally, I think that's where I set my expectations right now.
Is this the year, like, are you allowing yourself to dream on a natty, actually?
I mean, I think that you kind of have to.
Right, yeah. Okay.
Like, because, I mean, and it's not just like Drew Allar, coming back, and Singleton and Allen. I think that it's the move to get Jim Knowles. It's retaining Andy Kotelnicki for a second year when he had serious head coaching interest elsewhere. It's these recruiting classes that you've brought in, these sophomores, redshirt freshmen, juniors, guys that are going to be asked to step into larger roles. I think that all of this has been building where you have an infrastructure with really key guys at every level that you can really rely on and lean on, and then have younger guys step up next to them. Like, I like a very quick example of this is just like defensive tackle, where you have Zane Durant back. I know he's one of your guys, for his senior year, and he can show all these other young guys that they have. They lost a lot at DT, and there's a lot of reps available, but you have that guy, and then you have all these younger players who are talented, have high ceilings. They can look to him and follow his lead and raise their games at that level. So I think that there's a lot of different things that are going into this kind of being a year for Penn State to, go for it.
I like it, man. We're going to be reading all the coverage on Lions 247, checking out the podcast as well. Daniel, I'll see you in Vegas.
I hope so.
It's going to be fun, man. Really
Yes.
enjoy this.
Thank you, bud.